Hi, this is Jeremy, and you're watching our third micro lecture. In this micro lecture, we're going to continue on with some of the key stages for motion design. In the previous one, we looked at all the different layers that we go through in terms of concept development. Then we looked at storyboarding, and you see with the third image there, the colored image, style frames, and that's one of the areas that I'll be looking at today. So we're looking at what happens after we storyboard. What are the key steps? So again, we're going through this really messy process, working towards a solution. We have a model of motion design process that we're wanting everyone to explore and see if it works for you in terms of producing, really fantastic pieces of design. We looked at concept development, we looked at research, and we looked at in that visual research and technical research, which is technical research, a really important area when you're dealing with type design as well and you're using a program like After Effects. And we looked at the importance of storyboarding and how it was facing other people. It wasn't just designing for yourself and articulating the project for yourself, but for others to understand it as well. So the next step now would be filming. For some projects, it would be for filming. This is where it gets very much dependent on what it is you're creating with motion design. I've already talked about the fact that sometimes the research happens while you're developing your concept, and the borders of these stages kind of quite fluid. In particular with this, sometimes you need to do the filming straight away and then you start to do style framing and the next stages. Or if you've got a heavily art-directed project, you might do style frames before you go ahead and film so you completely understand what you're doing. You'll understand what I'm talking about in a second. So what I'm saying is with this step, filming, it could be that you go straight from storyboards to filming. That's probably likely what you'll be doing with our Kit Bootcamp when you're doing your own total sequences. But often we might go and jump in and do style frames before we go filming. And you'll see the style frames and what I mean about that when I talk about that step in a second. And that's something that's quite unique to motion design. I've got a picture here of a mobile phone though, and I'd encourage you to just utilize this as your camera. We do have cameras that you can borrow from the university, but mobile phones are getting stronger and stronger in terms of their ability to capture beautiful imagery. And I've got a clip to show you a little bit later about how you can use your mobile phone for filming. And I've also got some elements to kind of let you understand, I guess, the different possibilities of editing and filming and stuff as you kind of start to do that sort of work in this unit. With filming, you need to consider what is there and what is to come. So when you conceive a shot, you need to understand what you need to capture and what is going to happen in the shot. And that should be something you've considered in your storyboard, but also integral that you're aware of that when you're actually, in the field working. The storyboard should direct the stage. But I think what's really important when you do go out and film, after you've done a storyboard, you've got to be open to this idea that you are actually working in the environment that you might have visited, but not actually really filmed or actually kind of actively being part of. And sometimes you can get ideas as you're in the field. So it's this kind of middle ground I would suggest with going out and doing filming. You have a storyboard, but also engage spontaneity. I would film what is on your storyboard, but I'd also allow a bit of space for inspiration to take you in other directions as well. Remember, you are editing all this stuff so you can play different possibilities. I know a director like Baz Luhrmann, I think I've heard that he has these beautiful, beautiful storyboards, but then he films, about 6 times the amount of footage that should be in the movie in terms of just playing different possibilities when he's out filming scenes, and then he kind of puts them together in an editing suite. So he's open to this idea of spontaneously experimenting. So great ideas can occur on location. So film multiple approaches from the storyboard and some random experiments. So this is what I would suggest at this stage when you actually go out and film. And here's some examples of how an iPhone can be used to film different transitions to give you some ideas. The really important thing is this is a whole focus of the lecture series in week 5, just as you're developing your first assessment. But we don't expect you to be amazing cameramen at the moment, but experiment, explore. There's lots of material online, and here's one. I hope you found that helpful. Obviously, filming is requiring a whole different skill set. I think we are very visually literate, as I mentioned before today, with the way that we use Instagram and we're filming things for TikTok or YouTube or whatever. So we are developing sort of, the eye of an art director, a videographer, a cameraman, even if we haven't actually gone about and filmed stuff. So just see how far you can take it in terms of filmmaking. You might find that you have this natural skill which you didn't realize that can really change, possibly your career direction if you're working in social media design and so forth. So the step after filming is style frames. Though for heavily art directed projects, as I said, style frames might come first before you film, so you really fully understand what the vision is and what it is that you're creating. So style frames are this. When you saw the sequence that we showed before, we created a series of just images that we created in Photoshop, so we knew what it was that we were designing. In After Effects, you can animate all these elements, but it's about doing a static shot, just looking at some of your key shots and creating them in the way that you aesthetically want to create them, to know that your concept works and that's what you're working towards. So a style frame is a snapshot of a finished frame as it would look within a longer animation. It aims to capture the overall look and feel of an animated or live action video, but in a still image. Style frames can help capture the colors, mediums, textures, photography, and assets that you plan to use in your video. You might use Photoshop or Illustrator depending on the nature of your design project. So it is a case that you almost want a proof of concept, and often we'll present style frames along with a storyboard to a client to get sign-off before we then go into the production process of creating the full animation, going out and filming everything. Style frames are integral to kind of define what the project is, especially if it's heavily art directed, like I said. So if you are doing treatments of typography, if it's got a particular sort of graphic animated style, you want to actually fully develop that, but you don't have the energy, or you don't want to put the time into creating the whole of the work to get buy-in. You want to just do a couple of key frames to show what it is that you're creating. So you might, for instance, do a style frame for the beginning of a sequence. If there's a key change in the sequence, you might also do a style frame for that. And then if there's a different stylistic sort of change towards the end of a sequence, you might actually do a style frame for that. So you might have 3 style frames, and that helps kind of understand the project And then sometimes that can really help with the filming element, especially if you're using a lot of special effects and you really understand then, how to film what it is you want for the footage, which you then are adjusting with special effects and all sorts of work, post-production work in After Effects. And this is an example of a still frame that we did for the sequence, which you're going to see online as a bit of an online tutorial as well. So these are further examples of still frames. It's almost like doing the artwork, the still images that define the full direction. Like I said, it's a bit of a proof of concept. It makes you understand exactly what it is you're creating. So that's the end of this week's micro lectures. Before I go, however, I want to hand you across to a bit of a documentary on Saul Bass. I mentioned this iconic film title sequence designer quite a few times in this series of micro lectures, and his work continues to define the direction that title sequencing, animation, music video, and so forth operate. I showed you an example of some Avengers opening title sequences that are influenced by him. So I thought I'd just show a little bit more about his work and hopefully inspire you to look even deeper into what he's doing and has done.
Well, I began as a graphic designer. As part of my work, I created many film symbols for ad campaigns. During that period, I happened to be working on the symbols for Carmen Jones and Man with the Golden Arm for Otto Preminger. And at one point in our work, Otto and I just looked at each other and said, why not make it move? The audience involvement with a film should really begin with the very first frame. You have to remember that until then, titles had tended to be lists of dull credits, mostly ignored or used for popcorn time. So there seemed to be a real opportunity to use titles in a new way, to actually create a climate for the story that was about to unfold. The film was about drug addiction, and the symbol, that is the arm, in its jagged form, expressed the jarring, disjointed existence of the drug addict. Now, to the extent that it was an accurate and telling synthesis of the film and the ad campaign, these same qualities came with it into the theater. And of course, with the addition of motion and sound, really came alive and set up the mood and the texture of the film. Walk on the Wild Side, I used a cat, a creature we've probably stopped really seeing a long time ago. Now the challenge was how to restore our original view of a cat when it was new and strange, and to transform it into a pervasive presence, which was at the same time faithful to Nelson Algren's story of New Orleans street life.
Thank you.